I don't know why man chooses war.
It was terrible. Wars are not good.
We just did our duty and pray the Lord. Son of a gun.
They fired at you, you fired at them.
If we had, the United States had one good war, that was it.
It was a difficult job, and by God, if I didn't do it.
On this day, 75 years ago, more than 150,000 Allied troops were on ships and planes heading to the coast of Normandy to liberate France from fascism. Thousands never made it off the beaches. Many never even reached the shore. But it was a success, now known as the beginning of the end of World War II. We're at the International Museum of World War II in Natick, Massachusetts, where visitors come face to face with history. When the war ended, not many men talked about it, and the sad reality is that memories of the war are disappearing, with hundreds of World War II veterans dying every day. Tonight, you'll meet 6 men from the greatest generation who shared their stories of triumph and horror. In 1944, millions of Allied troops were waiting for the orders to invade Europe. The mission: liberate Nazi-occupied France. Hitler's military had been preparing for an invasion and had fortified hundreds of miles of coastline along the English Channel. On the morning of June 6, 1944, Operation Overlord was underway. Destination: Normandy.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
5 landing beaches were chosen along a 50-mile stretch of coastline, codenamed Sword, Juno, Gold, Omaha, and Utah. It was the largest amphibious assault in history, more than 5,000 ships and 13,000 aircraft.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is New York, NBC Newsroom again. Men and women of the United States, this is a momentous hour in world history. This is the invasion of Hitler's Europe.
That's who we were after, Hitler and all his henchmen.
On the morning of June 6th, Arthur Rhodes was on the first wave of ships heading to the coast.
And there was this whole vast armada heading in the same direction. Oh, it was unbelievable.
He grew up in North Dakota, and at age 24, he joined the Navy to avoid being drafted into the Army.
I didn't want to slog in the mud in the Army. I'd like a clean ship if I had to go.
He went into the so-called 90-Day Wonder program, and after 3 months of officer training, he became a staff engineer.
If a ship broke down, if a diesel engine went out, I'd have to see that it got repaired.
By March of 1944, Rose was in England. For the next few months, it was all training for the invasion, which was originally planned for June 5th.
The invasion should have happened a day earlier. We went out from Portsmouth, and it was so stormy, had to come back. It must have been traumatic for Eisenhower. And so the next day we went out and crossed the channel. It was still stormy, but I guess it wasn't as stormy.
He describes his uncertainty ahead of D-Day in a letter he wrote to his family after the invasion.
Dear Mom, Dad, and kids, it came one day. D-Day will be in June 6th. What a feeling that is. I probably can't describe it. Not fear, not excitement, not relief.
Just a funny feeling in the stomach. A nervousness, edginess, and expectancy. What could I do in an invasion? Pull engines in the middle of a battle? Change injectors on a hot beachhead? Weld a hole in a bow? No, I wouldn't go. I would come along after the smoke cleared from the battlefield, the wreckage. The danger would all be past. I would come in and then take over.
But that was not to be.
Hours before the assault, he was off the coast of Normandy with other officers waiting.
Guns from battleships shooting to the shore, and I saw the explosions over there. I remember the plunks going around us, and we didn't realize it until another ship came by. Said, "Get out of there, aiming at you."
Among the thousands of young men who boarded those ships to take on the Nazis, many were just teenagers, barely out of high school.
When you're young like that and you tell somebody they're going to go to war, that's kind of scary.
Charlie Sanderson grew up in Shirley, Massachusetts. In 1943, at the age of 18, he was drafted, having never finished high school.
President Roosevelt sent me a letter, and he said, "Greetings."
It wasn't long before he was off to basic training, and one of the first things the Army asked him,
"Do you like guns?" And I said, "Yeah, I like guns."
But the guns they were talking about were not the rifles he had in mind. He would be firing a massive howitzer.
So I learned what guns were. I not only got an education, but I lost my hearing because of it.
He shipped off to England before finishing basic training to wait for orders to invade.
The best part of it was, I guess, I was 18 years old, and I was looking for the young girls, not looking for the war.
Soon enough, the war was right in front of him. He was on a landing ship assigned to a truck bringing his gun to Omaha Beach.
The landing was what was interesting. You see, I never learned how to swim.
When the doors of Sanderson's landing ship opened, he wasn't going anywhere.
They said, "Go, Sanderson, go, go, go." And I said, "I can't go. There's no bottom. My truck will tip over." What bothered me is driving off into the water and the truck going underwater. It can drive underwater, but I can't because I can't swim. What had happened was we unfortunately landed right where there was a bomb crater or something.
Eventually, he made it onto shore and into enemy territory.
I saw things you wouldn't believe. Planes flying over, pieces of the wings falling off, the part of the fuselage, men jumping out. They never make it to the ground. The German fighter pilots were there to strafe them. The American officers had about a 3-inch high, 1-inch wide white band painted on the front and back of his helmet, and that's what the Germans used for a target. They'd shoot the medics too. They didn't recognize Red Cross or anything like that. They just shot everybody.
Thousands were killed or wounded in Normandy. When the fighting stopped, Sanderson, with his truck, was part of a special detail to pick up the bodies of soldiers.
The way it affects me the most now is you see on TV on Memorial Day, you see all the white crosses. Well, I took those boys down there by the truckload and unloaded them. People just can't comprehend that there's that many people that you pick them up by the truckload. It was just, a disaster everywhere.
I think it felt real quite early.
Graham Alvord graduated from Harvard with a degree in economics before he joined the Navy in 1941.
I was feeling very patriotic in those days, and if your country's in war, why, you just as soon be a part of it.
He was stationed in Puerto Rico typing war correspondence, but after a few years, he wanted a more exciting opportunity on a new fleet of vessels called LSTs, or landing ship tanks.
It also means large, slow target.
They were more than 300 feet long, specially designed to carry vehicles, supplies, and troops directly onto beaches. Alvord became an executive officer on LST-133, believed to be the first onto Omaha Beach.
And we could see a lot of damage that was going on. You can read about warfare, but when you're up there and they're shooting at you, and you look at it a little differently.
LSTs would make several trips across the English Channel to pick up and drop off supplies.
And LSTs that blew up, disappeared in front of us. War was not fun.
On Alvord's third trip back to Omaha Beach, his LST took a direct hit.
Partway across on the third trip, we struck a mine. The ship was just pretty badly destroyed, although not sunk, but in bad shape. We had a lot of dead bodies.
The blast killed or wounded dozens of people. Alvord stayed with his ship as it was towed back to England. He would never return to France during the war.
I was one of the lucky ones. Still one of the lucky ones.
The battle for the beaches cleared the way for the Allies to free France. Up next, we'll hear from a New England veteran who helped supply the front lines while serving in a segregated unit. He describes how art got him through the fighting. Once supplies started pouring onto the shore after the initial assault in Normandy, it took a small army to unload them. Men in segregated units were often the ones unloading the much-needed equipment onto the beach.
That was a thing, with a segregated army.
Ashleigh Brian was in his third year of art school in New York City when he was drafted.
I was drafted into a port battalion of stevedores. I knew nothing of docks and working in cargo, so all of that came about through basic training.
His training took him to Boston, where he spent a lot of time sketching the world around him, like the iconic Custom House and even Fenway Park.
Whenever I had any break, I had my sketch pad and was drawing.
He was stationed in Scotland ahead of the invasion. For many black soldiers from the U.S., it was a different world.
When we were stationed in Glasgow, a number of the soldiers from the South had never experienced a white person being decent and dealing with them. And the people accepted them. They were so friendly that the officer would restrict us after work so we couldn't go into town.
Drawing helped get him through the war, and his fellow soldiers were okay with it.
They'd often say, "Oh, you go ahead and draw," because my rhythm and work was so off from theirs, it would throw their ability to do the job. You go ahead and draw.
After D-Day, his unit was dug in on Omaha Beach, waiting, at times like sitting ducks, for ships and supplies to come in.
Well, it's all chance. I mean, why I wasn't shot, by the snipers, because there were the pillboxes all around. And so when soldiers came ashore, anyone came, they could be picked off.
While other soldiers slept, he would draw, capturing everyday life at war.
It was to keep my mind. I would have gone crazy with the destruction and devastation around me. If I couldn't draw, I wouldn't have lasted. It's drawing that saved me.
His drawings also show the toll segregation took on fellow soldiers, even after the war came to an end. This is a sketch of a black soldier who had just been told he would need to wait for another ship home because there was only room for white soldiers.
We didn't go home as a unit. We went home in dribs and drabs where they had space for 2 or 3 of us on the segregated ships. The segregation was enforced always.
As the Allies were preparing for the invasion of Normandy, Santo DeSalvo was fighting the Nazis in Italy.
Climb mountains. We climb mountains galore. That's one hilly country.
DeSalvo grew up in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, and was drafted when he was barely 20 years old.
Right on my birthday,
Before heading to basic training, he was more concerned about failing his physical and not being able to do his part in the war.
I didn't want to fail my test. I took my training very seriously.
By December of 1943, he was in San Pietro, where the Germans were relentlessly shelling the Allies.
No matter what division tried, nobody made it. I actually saw human pieces flying through the air. I couldn't believe it. And then I got wounded myself.
While DeSalvo was recovering off the front lines, the Allies took San Pietro, a critical victory.
Lost a lot of men at San Pietro.
Italy was aligned with Nazi Germany during the war, and the fighting took its toll on soldiers like DeSalvo, the son of Sicilian immigrants.
To fight us now, they'd be fighting their brother or their uncle. A lot of Italians out here.
From Italy, DeSalvo made his way into France in the fall of 1944 and was part of the second D-Day invasion. Operation Overlord had already happened in Normandy, and as the Allies marched across northern France, Operation Anvil attacked the Germans from the south. By December, he was in another fierce battle, pinned down by enemy fire.
We were trapped in that foxholes. The machine gun was strafing the area, So as it got dark, I got the idea of, since you couldn't throw a hand grenade that far, shoot it in the rifle. The following morning, when we got up to move forward, there were 3 guys out there, so they must have got hit from the shrapnel from my grenades.
While he didn't think much of his actions, the U.S. Army did, and he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for single-handedly capturing the enemy emplacement.
I'll tell you, at the time, all you're thinking of, I can't be trapped here forever.
The Distinguished Service Cross is our nation's second highest military decoration, behind only the Medal of Honor. In 1942, more than 3 million soldiers were in the U.S. Army. Fern Frechette was 22, drafted just 2 months after his wedding.
That came to my mind. I'm going to war. Am I coming home?
This quiet, soft-spoken man was destined for France. His life-changing tour of duty began in Normandy.
We had so many ships out there. I mean, it's almost impossible to talk about it.
Frechette was with General George Patton's Third Army. His job was top secret at the time and involved intercepting codes from the Germans.
Intercept code, and then I would pass it over to the decipher, and he would come up with the idea of what we're going to do.
He and the other code interceptors could warn Allied troops of enemy movements, but he didn't always have a warning.
This plane came over the horizon, and he just came real low, and he shot at us, the son of a gun. I was inside of the truck, and when he started to shoot, I jumped out of the truck and jumped underneath the truck. After he had gone by, I noticed I was just under the gas tank. Oh boy. That's when I started to shake. Oh, scared as hell.
At the end of 1944, Frechette was heading to the Ardennes region of France. It was the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. The weather was brutal, the ground frozen, and Allied troops were dug in. One night, as Frechette was in a Jeep heading down a road, an explosion caused the driver to slam on the brakes.
My helmet came down and broke my nose. Oh, Jesus.
It was bad. So bad he had to leave the front lines for surgery, if you can even call it that.
I had a bone sticking out of the nose. So he took tweezers and he pushed it out of my nose. Oh, I can almost feel it now. God.
We had a gun position and the Germans came all around us.
Sanderson remembers his lieutenant's grim warning as the enemy approached.
So the first man that turns around, I'll shoot him in the back. We're going to fight to the last man.
The Allied troops were cold and exhausted. Then, one day came a welcome sight. General Patton and the Third Army.
Old Blood and Guts came in with his tanks. Patton with his tanks. He's the one that saved us.
The Battle of the Bulge was a decisive victory for the Allies. The Germans' last push was a failure. They never recovered. By spring of 1945, as the war was coming to an end, Frechette had rejoined his unit in time to witness what Hitler's army had been doing off the battlefield.
After we got to the concentration camps, then we saw what was going on. That was something to see.
Inside Buchenwald, one of the largest concentration camps, Jews, political prisoners, and even American POWs were worked and starved to death, or simply killed.
I did run into some Americans, and were they happy to see us? Oh my God. I never see guys, they just grab you and hug the hell out of you.
Inside the camps, Frechette and others were armed with cameras. What he saw through the lens has haunted him for decades.
I was just happy I had a camera. Gee whiz, what a mess that was. Gee, that was so bad. These wagon full of bodies. There's human ashes, crematories. Jesus. When I think about it, I start shaking, I start crying. I didn't talk too much about the war. When I came home, I kept my mouth shut and I just got back in with the rest of the people.
When you first come home from a war, you've seen so much of that stuff that you don't want anything more to do with it, you know. But as time goes on, it heals. And so you're not as afraid to talk about it. And I think that the people should know. If nobody ever talks about it, they probably don't realize that it's as bad as what it is.
That's one of the things we try to understand in life, why people take issues to put others down. Marian Anderson had once said, in order to keep another down, you have to keep yourself down as well. So when you press another, you're oppressing yourself.
This letter that was discovered just recently brought back a lot. But before that, I think it was just another day, every D-Day.
We knew that Hitler was the #1 guy and we wanted to get rid of him.
It's the younger generation that are writing books and, following up and getting information on World War II. Because there ain't a lot to be known. Nobody talked about it.
The Department of Veterans Affairs estimates that roughly 350 World War II veterans die every day, and with them, more memories of the war fade away. I'm Nick Emmons. Thank you for watching D-Day 75, New England's Heroes.